Brexit is finally happening. Britain leaves the European Union after more than 3 years of political chaos. But what does it stand to gain or lose from quitting the bloc? And does it signal the beginning of the breakup of the UK itself? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the programme. I'm Nick Clark. After more than 3 years of political wrangling, 2 general elections and angry protests across the United Kingdom, Brexit is finally here. 2300 GMT on Friday, the time that goes down in history, the hour the UK became the first country to leave the European Union, ending its 47-year membership of the bloc. Britain has until the end of the year to reach a deal with the EU on their future relationship. But as Emma Haywood reports, many fear it will take much longer to reach a comprehensive agreement.
Breaking away from what many have known for nearly a lifetime, there is an appetite for a different future, and one very much outside the EU, here in the seaside town of Great Yarmouth, where just over 70% of people voted to leave 3.5 years ago. And the desire for Brexit is still strong.
I think it's about time it starts to happen. I think the uncertainty of the last few years has not been good for anybody, really.
It's nothing about immigration. It's about being controlled by people who've got no interest in this country whatsoever.
Just think the Europeans rule us too much. You know, we should be all independent.
Well, just hoping everything's going to get going again. Businesses and everything. Just get the borders controlled, just everything we want Brexit for.
We're in uncharted waters, we are. No one knows. I think that'd be all right short term, but long term, who knows?
In the winter months, it can feel like this is a place time forgot. Like other resorts, its fortunes have ebbed and flowed. The energy sector has helped bring money in, but there are pockets of poverty and wages are lower than the national average. Many people are pinning their hopes on Brexit, hoping that somehow it will transform their lives on a local and a national level, that it will bring prosperity to this town. And that's not just here, it's in Leave voting communities up and down the country. The Imperial Hotel has been in the same family since the 1930s. It's busy all year, but there are concerns about what Brexit might bring.
I voted against the leave because I feel we were better off in the EU. I fully recognise now the fact that we are leaving the EU, but I'm still greatly concerned about what the future will hold. What the future will hold for this business, what the future will hold for getting supplies in from Europe, what the future will be for getting my staff to come and work here that we need.
No one knows exactly what Brexit will bring, what impact it will have. Only that the changes won't be felt in the next few months, but the decades to come. Emma Haywood, Al Jazeera, Great Yarmouth.
Well, little will change immediately. The transition period lasts 11 months, but there are big challenges, of course, ahead. Top priority for the British government is to work out a trade deal with the EU before the December the 31st deadline. But analysts warn it could take years to reach agreement. The UK will create a new immigration system, and although the rights of EU nationals currently living in the United Kingdom will not be affected, the number of new arrivals from the EU will drop. It'll also be harder for UK citizens to live and work in the European Union. Britain will now share a 483-kilometre land border with the EU between Northern Ireland and the Irish Republic. But it's unclear how Northern Ireland can stay in the UK's customs territory while applying EU rules on its agricultural and manufactured products. All right, let's straight away bring in our guests. In Belfast, we have David Phinnemore, who's a professor of European politics at Queen's University, Belfast. In London, Catherine McBride, senior economist at the International Trade and Competition Unit at the Institute of Economic Affairs. And joining us from Stockholm in Sweden, also via Skype, is Carl Bildt, former Swedish Prime Minister and now a co-chair of the European Council on Foreign Relations. Welcome all to the programme. We've been through this all so many times, but this time it is real. So I'm going to start by asking you, first of all, what your general assessment is of where we're at. And first up, Catherine McBride, is this the dawn of a bright new era, as Boris Johnson would have it, or one of fog and gloom? What do you reckon?
Oh, it's definitely the dawn of a bright new era, that's for sure. However, it's going to be a long dawn, because we don't really get out of the EU's auspices until January the 1st next year. So now we go through a transition period where we still follow all of the EU rules, and we're still paying into the EU, but we won't be represented in their parliament. But it does give us a chance to start to make our own trade agreements and start to explore how we can expand outside of the EU, which will be great.
Carl Bildt, a moment of national renewal, as some would have it. What do you think?
Well, it remains to be seen. We really don't know. As was pointed out, the UK remains in virtually everything except the decision-making for the next year, at the least. And then it has the task of sort of catching up with the EU and all of the, I think there are roughly 600 agreements that the EU has with different parts of the world, and they need to catch up with those. And exactly how that will happen, how long time that will take, and where they will be heading then, that's extremely uncertain, and it would take, I think, years for that to be sorted out.
OK, well, we'll get into the nitty-gritty of that in just a moment. But first, David Phinnemore, we have to remember, of course, that Britain's departure is a moment of profound sadness for half of the nation. Can those divisions be healed, do you think?
I think it's going to be very difficult because, as was indicated earlier, there's still plenty more to be worked out in terms of the relationship with the European Union. And I think for a lot of people, there would be a hope that there's going to be a very close relationship with the European Union, where they might actually be able to retain some of what they've had as part of being part of the European Union. But equally, on the other hand, we've got some people who want a very, very clean break from the European Union. And so how they're going to reconcile the two positions on that is going to be very, very difficult. And also, you've got big divisions within the UK, not just between Remainers and Leavers, but also the position of Scotland vis-à-vis the rest of the UK, Northern Ireland's position in this process as well. I think the whole process has revealed a whole number of divisions within the UK, which are going to take some time to address.
Catherine McBride, those divisions, are they going to complicate issues? Brexiteers would say that freed of the dead hand of the EU, the UK will thrive. But aren't the divisions going to get in the way of that?
I actually think there will be very few divisions. I think a lot of people have been exaggerating the difference that leaving the EU will make. People will still be able to travel to Europe and still be able to buy European goods. You can buy European goods all around the world in lots of countries that don't have trade agreements with Europe. Certainly in Australia, you can buy Parmesan cheese. In New York, you can buy Chateau Lafite. You know, you don't actually need a trade agreement to trade with the EU. And nor do you need a trade agreement to go and visit Europe. You will obviously need some kind of visa if you want to work there. But I think when you look at the numbers, the UK absorbs many more Europeans than goes the other way. There are more British people living in Australia than there are British people living in the EU. So I think that it's actually been exaggerated, and I think most people will realise within about a year how little they needed the EU.
But it won't apply if the promised prosperity doesn't come. And if you talk about numbers, here's some numbers. The British car production has fallen to its lowest level in almost a decade, with the trade body warning of the dangers of Brexit. Thursday, the Bank of England further downgraded its view of the economic prospects to the lowest level since the Second World War. Doesn't sound good, does it, Catherine?
Well, actually, the CBI has come out with most independent businesses are feeling very buoyant. And the CBI is not a fan of Brexit by any stretch. So I think if they can turn around and say, actually, most of our members feel quite jubilant, then that's a good thing. But with the car production, that has nothing to do with Brexit. The biggest car producers in the UK are actually Japanese or German or Indian owned, and the big markets for cars all around the world are in fact in the Asia-Pacific area. With an increasing urbanisation, many young people aren't even bothering to get driver's licences. So they're not buying as many cars, and ageing populations, which all of Europe has, especially, well, Germany, but the UK as well. Older people tend not to renew their cars so easily and get new cars, especially when people are waiting for new technology. The fact that all of Europe has said that we will be moving to zero carbon or low carbon, I think a lot of people won't buy a new car now until they can buy the most efficient electric car.
Okay,
and know that they can recharge it.
Sure. Carl Bildt, in Stockholm, you talked about it's all going to take a long time, which it certainly will, but we've got 1 year to make the start of a trade deal. Are you saying that the chances are this will just be, in the event, it'll just be an agreement to make further agreements down the line?
I haven't heard anyone who really believes that everything can be sorted out in just 1 year. Remember, we have been together, Sweden came in somewhat later, has to be said, but the UK has been in the European Union for 47 years. There's an enormous amount of commonalities and common rules and arrangement, more than we are aware of. And to sort of go through all of this and pick out that and stop that and whatever, it's going to take quite some time. We can probably in a year do sort of a fairly minimalistic free trade agreement. That should be possible and that's desirable. But for example, a lot of the things that has to do with domestic security or standards or climate, but take that as an example, that will take quite some time to sort out. And that is why we're heading into a period of some fairly significant uncertainty that's going to take quite some time.
Right, and David Phinnemore, the European Union's chief Brexit negotiator, that's Michel Barnier, on Monday he warned that this whole process would only ever be an exercise in damage limitation.
Well, I think that's certainly the European Union's view, and I think that would be widely shared beyond the European Union as well. I think what you've got with Brexit is a whole series of significant challenges. In some respects, getting out of the EU has been the really easy bit. Now you've actually got to piece together the relationship, build up the range of trade and other agreements so that you can get the level of continued cooperation that you actually want. And I think this is, as was indicated earlier, going to take a considerable amount of time. I think it's utterly naive to assume that this can be done in 11 months. It'd be totally unprecedented, particularly when you, on top of the time issue, you've got the big differences between the UK and the EU on some quite fundamental issues. If we look at the way in which the EU concludes its trade agreements with other countries, it's always arguing in favour of level playing fields, particularly with European countries. And the whole of the sort of future prospect of the UK benefiting from Brexit is predicated on an assumption that you can retain a lot of the access to the single market that the UK currently has at the moment. And unless the UK is going to sign up to regulatory alignment and level playing field, I can't see the EU agreeing to maintain the level of access to the single market we have at the moment.
Right, so if this is the hard bit, we've already seen how difficult it was to resolve the easy bit. So if this is the hard bit, what if no resolution is found? What if we just hit deadlock? What happens then? Major challenges ahead. Catherine?
Actually, I don't agree. We're net importers from the EU in a large way, and I don't think that the UK will change that. A lot of people's tastes have gravitated to buying EU products. But we've also had 47 years of comparative advantage within the EU, so that we don't actually compete anywhere near as much as people think. And even within the, say, car producers, they will have one factory that produces all of the engines and another one that produces all the hubcaps, and they will swap their produce around. So that this kind of division of labour has benefited the UK to the point where we don't have the big fight to make. A lot of trade deals are about protecting your local industries as well as trading with other countries. Now, because we've gone through 47 years of dividing up who's good at what in the EU, I think we've actually gone through the hardest part of what we protect. And then we just have to agree to keep doing kind of what we've been doing to a certain degree. I wouldn't buy into the level playing field. I think that's dangerous for many reasons. And I'm not sure that there is a level playing field at the moment in Europe anyhow. Every country seems to have various carve-outs that they don't want to level up. You know, in the terms of taxation, if you look at the taxes in Hungary or the taxes in Ireland or the taxes in Estonia, they are very, very different from the taxes in France. It's the same with financial services. There are German local banks that are carved out where they wouldn't let English building societies get carved out. So, you know, it's not as level as people like to make out, and so I wouldn't buy into that. And I think we can do a trade deal. It won't be ideal because people are saying, oh, we'll use the Canada deal. We can take that off the shelf, if you like, and just change the numbers and the words here and there.
Carl Bildt, I can see
we would want a deal that does
Catherine,
a lot more.
We need to move it around a bit. So, Carl Bildt, can I just get your point of view on this first?
No, I think that obviously not everything is harmonized inside the European Union. We only harmonize what is necessary. But what is necessary, and of course UK can lose out of that. But speaking from certain experience, I've been sitting, I think, 100 meetings of the Council of Ministers in the European Union. I found the value of really, when things are happening around the world, when things are happening in the global economy, we meet every month with ministers and coordinate activities. And that is a value in this world that the UK are going to miss. The UK is a small country in a world that is changing very fast. And to lose that particular possibility to be together with European colleagues, to address the different challenges they're going to have every month. I've seen the countries that are outside the EU and have their poor diplomats banging on the door and trying to listen to what is discussed between the European Union ministers every month. I think it's going to be difficult. The UK is obviously going to lose out in terms of influence and weight in political terms, apart from, and we can discuss how many percentage of GDP, apart from the economic loss that is unavoidable, bigger or smaller.
Catherine, do you just want to come back? Sorry, Carl, I'm just going to jump in because we do need to move it on. There's lots of issues to cover yet. Catherine, just come back briefly, 30 seconds if you would on that.
Well, I mean, the UK is a much bigger country than Sweden and also a much bigger country than Norway, but it's managed to be a separate country. The UK is 10 times bigger than New Zealand or Singapore, or a smaller population than Japan, but the landmass is probably similar. You know, I don't buy into this, you don't have influence if you're separate from the EU. I mean, Switzerland has a small population and it's a smaller country and it's a much bigger noise in the world.
Right. David Phinnemore, what's your take on this? We had the UK flag that flew at Brussels and it's consigned to the EU Museum. Would you say that it goes there along with UK's position geopolitically, that the UK is diminished as a geopolitical force because of this?
Oh, I think it's vast majority of member states, including the large member states of the European Union, believe that membership of the European Union provides them with greater voice on the international stage. Now, there's broad agreement on that. I think it follows, therefore, that the UK, in leaving the EU, will see its voice diminished, initially at least. It's going to be a major challenge for it to ensure that its voice continues to be heard on the world stage as a relatively small, medium-sized country. It's no longer one of the big players that it used to be. And I think it is going to find it very difficult to get that voice projected. I think when we also think about the European Union, the EU will be quite important in determining what regulations govern trade across Europe. And the UK is going to be outside the decision-making processes on that. If we think about the role that the EU is going to be playing in addressing climate change, that's going to be important. It wants to set itself as a world leader on that. I can't see the UK taking on the world leading role there. It'd be far more influential if it was within a group such as the European Union, promoting a shared view which could be representative of a much larger size of population than the UK currently has.
Right, and David, just changing tack slightly, you're in Belfast in Northern Ireland, where there's been this whole issue of the customs union, Brexit, a massive issue there. Tell us what the mood is like there right now.
Well, I wouldn't say there's any mood of jubilation at all. I think there's a mood of quite considerable concern. Yes, we've now got the protocol on Ireland, Northern Ireland, such that we will not have a hard border on the island of Ireland come the end of 2020. But there are serious concerns being expressed by business and politicians about the implications of an increase in checks and controls and formalities on the movement of goods, both from Northern Ireland into Great Britain, but also importantly from Great Britain to Northern Ireland. They are anticipating additional costs having to be borne by businesses, which for consumers in Northern Ireland are likely to see an increase in the price of goods. There's also concerns around the disruption to supply chains that having customs controls and regulatory controls in the Irish border are likely to mean. How this is actually going to play out is going to be highly contingent on the extent to which the UK, in its relationship with the EU, moves as close as possible to the EU in terms of customs arrangements and also in terms of regulatory alignment. If you don't have those, then we are faced with quite serious disruption to the movement of goods across the Irish Sea. Now that then feeds into politics as well, where I think unionists, and particularly the loyalist community within unionism, is very concerned about what this all means for Northern Ireland's position within the United Kingdom and its internal market. And so Brexit has proved to be highly disruptive and highly concerning for a lot of people in Northern Ireland.
Okay.
And just because the UK is leaving at midnight tonight does not mean to say that any of those concerns are going to go away. They're simply exacerbated.
Just as we come to the final couple of minutes of the programme, I want to move on to the integrity of the United Kingdom itself. The headline of the Scotsman newspaper saying it's farewell, not goodbye. That is to say that Scotland will rejoin at some point. Catherine, if you could be brief on this. This is going to herald the breakup of the Union, is it?
Well, I doubt it, because 60% of Scottish trade is with the UK, or with the rest of the UK, not with the EU. Scotland would have to start by getting its own currency, running its own finances a lot better than it presently does, if it
but
ever
Nicola
wants
Sturgeon
to
is
make
pushing
it
for
as an
another
independent
referendum,
country.
isn't she?
Well, she is. She lost the last one, and maybe if she keeps asking the same question, she might eventually win it. But I don't think. I think the Scots are very canny, I think is the word, and I don't think they will fall for that one. You know, if the oil price, when the last referendum was held, the oil price was about $150 a barrel. Now it's less than half of that. And Scotland is not the economic powerhouse it would be with the low oil price. So I don't think that they can make it as an independent country. And there are already 5 independent countries waiting to get into the EU. So I'm not sure that the EU would even let them jump the queue.
All right.
If that's
well, Carl
the word.
Bildt,
They would
what's your
have to
assessment of
meet
this?
all of the EU's.
What's your assessment of this, Carl Bildt? How do you assess the unity of the United Kingdom?
That's up for the United Kingdom to decide. I don't think that is for us who are outside of the United Kingdom to have any views on. I would hope, I would say, personally, that I hope the United Kingdom stays together. Because I think integration inside the United Kingdom is good, as much as I think that integration inside the European Union is good. New borders and new barriers in Europe is not something I'm in favour of. I'm in favour of reducing it. Inside the United Kingdom, inside the European Union, that should be our goal.
Right, and David Phinnemore, from Northern Ireland's perspective, people are bringing them into that conversation on the concept of the United Kingdom as well.
Yes, well, I think I've already indicated there are concerns about what the implications of the protocol mean for Northern Ireland's position in the internal market. I think the way in which the whole withdrawal agreement process was handled by London has reflected a limited desire to really effectively engage with the devolved administrations, whether that be in Northern Ireland, in Wales or in Scotland. And I think a key challenge for the United Kingdom government going in the coming years is to ensure that the devolved administrations are consulted on what sort of future the UK is going to have with the EU. This cannot simply be a process which is driven by essentially an English Conservative Party governing in London. The voices from Northern Ireland, from Scotland and from Wales need to be heard if the UK is going to reduce some of the tensions which have been revealed in the Brexit process so far over the last number of years.
Well, we're finally there. We shall see how it all unfolds. That's it for this programme. Thanks to all our guests, David Phinnemore, Catherine McBride and Carl Bildt. Thanks very much indeed. And thank you too for watching. You can see the programme again anytime by visiting our website, aljazeera.com. And for further discussion, just go to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. You can also join the conversation on Twitter. Our handle for that is @AJ Inside Story. So from me, Nick Clark, and the whole team here, it's goodbye for now.